Welcome to Building Better Relationships with Chuck and Barb Lewis, equipping listeners and viewers with the biblical tools to conquer the difficulties faced in this life. Chuck has practiced crisis intervention since the 1980s and has been in ministry together with his wife Barb for over 20 years. They've taken the countless lessons and the knowledge they've acquired and have put them into this life skills class to share with you. We hope this blesses you.
Well, hello again. This is Pastor Chuck, and this is my wife.
I'm Barbara.
And we're excited to be with you again today on this program. And we trust that God is helping you with these things that we're teaching about. And I know every time we talk about it, it always helps me. How about you?
It does.
You know, we need to be reminded of things, and you know, we don't know it all. We don't, I don't feel like I not only have all the answers, but I don't even know all the questions. So, we continue to learn. But the goodness of the Lord is He keeps teaching us and showing us how to make things work better. And, we can always improve on our relationships if we're teachable and if we're willing to try some things differently than we've done before.
That's right.
So why don't you tell them what we're going to talk about today?
Okay, today we're talking about expectations and, expectations of each other in relationship. And, there is a law of expectation, and the law of expectation says that eventually you'll receive whatever you expect.
Yes.
So that can work for positive or negative. If we have negative, like if we're expecting to have a bad day, we'll probably have a bad day.
Yeah.
But if we're expecting God's favor, then we'll have God's favor.
Mm-hmm.
If we're expecting to experience breakthrough, eventually we'll experience breakthrough.
Right.
So we just want to talk about how expectations play out in our life. And one thing we wanted to talk about in our relationship, let's just say your husband and wife relationship, is having unrealistic expectations of each other.
That's a good one.
So do you want to talk about what are some unrealistic expectations we can have of each other?
See, I think that's such a good topic because I think sometimes when people get married, I know I've done a lot of marriage counseling and premarital counseling before I've married people over 50 years of ministry. And I can really hear a lot of expectation when people are getting ready to get married. And the thing is, if it's realistic expectation, that's okay.
Right.
Sometimes it's okay. Sometimes it's not fulfilled, even if it's okay. But if it's unrealistic, then that's really can cause a problem.
Yeah, like I know when we got married, and we got married 29 years ago.
Yes.
I think that I had put too many expectations on you, and I found out quickly that you couldn't fill all my needs.
Yeah,
so that was an expectation that you would fill all my needs.
Right, because we make lousy Holy Spirits. We just can't be the Holy Spirit. We can only be ourselves.
Right. And the good news about that is that drove me back to God.
Yeah.
And I realized how important it was that I maintained my relationship with the Lord, that God didn't make you to meet all my needs. He created us to have a hole in us that only He can fill.
Only He can fill.
So expecting you to meet all my needs was an unrealistic expectation. And I want to talk about an unrealistic expectation I heard a friend share recently. And she said her and her husband had been married for, let's just say, 30 years. And she expected him to know when she needed a hug. If she was upset that she needed a hug. So that was actually an uncommunicated expectation.
Right.
So she expected him just to know. And so she said, her friend asked her, she said, is your husband a mind reader? And she said, no. Well, and you haven't told him that you want a hug? And she said, no, I think he should know. And she said, well, um, if you've ever asked your husband for a hug, has he failed to give it to you? And she said, no. And then she said, well, look at your husband's family of origin. Were they huggers? And did they demonstrate, affection for each other? And she said, well, no, they didn't. So if his family wasn't like that, why would he know when you need a hug? So not communicating our expectations can set us up, for resentment.
Right.
So
Right.
unrealistic expectations and uncommunicated expectations can set us up for resentment.
Well, it sure can. And if we're resentful of each other, then our spirits are closed, and then we don't even want to talk. And,
Right.
you know, women primarily talk more than men. I mean, that's not true all the time, but, a lot of men don't need a lot of words. And I'm remembering about two guys that went fishing one day and started at 6 o'clock in the morning. Neither one of them are saying anything. About 11 o'clock that morning, one of them said, well, they sure don't seem to be biting much today. And the other guy said, nope, doesn't seem like it. And that's all they said all day. They went home that night. Their wives asked them, how was fishing? It was great. We talked all day. So a lot of guys don't need a lot of words. That's not true of all people, all men, but that can create a problem between husband and wife right there if the man doesn't have a lot of words and doesn't like to use a lot of words. um, the wife's expecting sometimes a lot more words and a lot more affirmation. So I think what you just said is very important, to not just expect the other one to know what we need, but to just say, I'd like to talk to you and I'd like to get your feedback on something. And
And
it can't.
men do like to be asked their opinion on things.
What they do, and a lot of men are problem solvers. So it's like, yeah, that sounds good. We can get into some problem solving. But I think to make a good uh, communication active is to not always talk about a problem.
Mhm.
Talk about things that you want to find out about the other person.
Yeah.
That's very, very good about dating. With dating, we're not going to talk about problems because we don't have any history. We're just going to talk about life and talk about what
Mhm.
we think and how we feel about things and what our relationships like with the Lord or things like that. And that really causes connection. And so that's really important in marriage as well as being single. And if we can incorporate the same thing in marriage as we had when we were single, we'll have a lot closer relationship.
Yeah, and what you said about men not having as much words as women in our relationship, it's the opposite. And I think it's because you're a counselor. God definitely gifted you with the words, counselor, preacher, teacher. And I didn't have enough words when we got married. And I realized as you would talk to me about that I thought things um, a lot more than what I expressed them.
Mm.
So I really had to work on expressing my thoughts more. And it was really a journey.
Mm.
And you definitely needed more words from me.
Mm.
And how could you know what I was thinking or feeling if I never told you? And I just wasn't used to expressing those things or feeling safe enough that what I said, would be received.
Right.
So I really had to work on that.
Well, and really, we need to give each other grace. If the one person can't express themselves a lot or don't have the words, that's not a time to slam the other person. It's a time to explore that area. I think we talked about what makes you feel safe when we're having a conversation and
Mhm.
what makes you feel unsafe. and to identify those topics, because there's certain topics that do that, and
Mhm.
other topics are kind of what I call benign, to where, like, what kind of landscaping should we put in, what kind of design should we make for our yard, things like that.
Things that aren't likely to cause an argument.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, those are pretty easygoing things, but if there's topics about money, there's topics about kids, topics about our sexual relationship, whatever, that can create conflict. Then we need to prepare those conversations, for that. And
Mhm.
so we use a phrase a lot of times when we're talking about a very crucial conversation, what I call a crucial conversation,
Okay.
and we talk about the walls of our
Oh yeah.
marriage. Tell them about that.
Yeah, whenever we're having a conversation and it is not going well, if it particularly is difficult, then we will reassure each other that we're not going anywhere, that the marriage wall, and I'll even do this, the marriage wall is intact. I'm not going anyplace.
Right.
Because you can work through a lot of hard things within the safety wall of marriage when you know the other person isn't going to leave. If you're always afraid they're going to leave, it's really hard to feel safe enough to talk about things.
Oh yeah.
So we reassure each other that so that we know that we can go ahead and talk about that hard thing, whatever it is that's causing the problem.
Well, that's so good, because really, if you don't establish that foundation point and that secure place, then our minds are drifting while the conversation's going on about the other topic. Our mind is drifting on, wow, sounds like they might leave me,
Yeah.
whatever. And the other person's not thinking that way at all. But we've got to identify that and establish, and you don't have to do that every time, but just if it's a critical situation where it's really touching off a lot of insecure feelings,
Mm-hmm.
that's when you really establish the safety wall.
Right. And that kind of brings up the topic of having negative expectations. So if you experience a lot of rejection and abandonment before your marriage, then you might have an expectation
Yeah,
that you're going to leave too,
right.
or, something negative is going to happen. And so you're bringing into it an expectation that affects how you're interacting and how you're communicating.
Right. And boy, that's such a great point, because I've worked with people that they say to each other on a regular basis, I just know it's a matter of time until you get sick of me and you're going to leave me. And that's going to happen at some point. Yeah, that's a terrible thing to say. And I have told people throughout the years, never speak what you don't want to see happen,
Mhm.
only speak what you do want to see happen.
Yeah, that's
So
good.
if I don't ever want my wife to leave me, I'm not going to speak that. I'm not going to just say that as a statement, and I'm certainly not going to prophesy that it's just a matter of time until you get sick of me. I'm not going to do that, because I don't want to see that happen. So why would I speak it?
That I'm glad you said that because that is a Chuck Lewis famous saying. Do not say what you don't want to see happen.
Boy, that's been powerful in my life.
Yeah, and I think another thing we do in relationships is when we get married, we come into it with an unspoken expectation that it'll be how it was in our family.
Yes.
So maybe in my family or our your family, there was a lot of communication and people talked through things to resolution. But then, so maybe I expect that, but I haven't talked to you about it.
Right.
And in your family, that didn't happen. People didn't talk about feelings. So you come into the relationship not expecting that we'll talk through things. So you come in with two different expectations, or you might have I think a good conversation to have when before you get married is what do you expect of a wife?
Hmm.
What do you want in a wife? What's important to you?
Right. Right.
And for the woman to let her spouse to be know what she expects in a husband or what is important to her in a husband, and then you start out knowing what each other's expectations are.
Well, that's so good. And I've brought that up with couples, and I've said, what are your expectations? And they've said, I don't know. I don't even know what my expectations are.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's where our homework comes into it, to where we begin to really think about that, write down some different expectations that you really want. What are the desires of your heart? The Bible said if we delight ourselves in the Lord, He will give us the desires of our heart. Well, it's pretty hard to really trust that to happen if you don't even know what the desires of your heart are. And God wants us to know. And it's okay to express that. So I like what you said about the expectations of having, we can either have negative expectations of things getting worse in our relationship, or we can have an expectations of things thriving and getting better and better and better,
Right.
closer and closer. Uh, if you're speaking negative things to each other, like we just described, if you're saying horrible things to each other, oh, you know what? I'm just so sick of this. It's just a matter of time until I'm out of here. If you're saying that out loud to your spouse, stop doing that.
Yeah.
Stop saying that, because if you don't want to see that happen, maybe you do want that to happen. Ask God to change your heart,
Mm-hmm.
and ask God to give you a love for
Mm-hmm.
your mate like you've never had before. I'm so in love with Barb that it just gets stronger and stronger. We've been, like she said, we've been married 39 years.
29.
39. I said 39.
Yeah.
29. Yeah. Yeah, I'm really making us old. But 29 years, it just gets better and better. And because we work on the relationship,
Mm-hmm.
we don't just expect the relationship to just uh, thrive on its own without us doing anything about it.
Yeah.
It takes work to make a good relationship, but it's not exhausting work. It's not unrealistic
Mm-hmm.
work
Yeah.
that nothing happens if you work on it. Um, you know, if you've got a belief system that it's doomed to fail, it's hard to work on it.
Right.
But it's not.
Yeah. And I think it's good to let go of perfection and be happy with forward progress. Tiny steps add up. So change your expectations by seeing what God's word has to say and what He would like to speak over your relationship. And then say those things. Say the
Absolutely.
positive things, the faith step or the faith statements that God has to
Yes.
say about you. And then again, just be happy with making some forward progress, not expecting it to be perfect because, as you've said so many times, practice makes progress.
Hmm.
It's not practice makes perfection.
No.
Practice makes progress.
Right. Right. And we try to eat healthy. We try to eat clean and not eat a lot of junk foods. And because we want our bodies to feel good. And I know if I'm just a junk food addict, and I'm just
Mm-hmm.
you know if I get hungry, just run down to the uh, drive-through store and get a hot dog, and a can of pop. Well, that is not giving my body what it needs.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to be healthy, you've got to start choosing nutritional things to feed your body with. One time when I drank a lot of pop, I used to drink a 6 pack of pop a day of Pepsi. I really did. It was amazing. And so one day I was filling my car with gas, And right when I got finished with filling the car, I felt the Lord speak to me. It wasn't an audible voice, but it was so clear. He said, "Would you just pour the rest of your Pepsi in the gas tank of your car?" And it was a new car. And I said, "Well, no, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't want to mess up my car." But he said, "But yet you'll pour it down your throat."
Mm.
And I just threw it right in the trash right there. And I just said, "Okay, I'm not going to be doing that anymore." Now, I haven't completely gave up Pepsi. I drink a little bit now and then, but I never drink a 6 pack a day. See, it's in moderation. And so, if our bodies need good nutrition, so does our relationship.
Yeah.
So, you have to look, am I contributing to my relationship or am I contaminating it? Because you're doing one of the two.
So you can deliberately do things to contribute and see that as sowing seed
Sowing seed.
and expecting a harvest. And a verse for that would be, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you."
Right.
So whatever you need, do for the other person, and
Absolutely.
expect there to be a harvest.
Expect there to be a harvest.
Yeah.
So if you're identifying with this conversation today and you say, "Man, we've been really contaminating our relationship. Is there hope at all?" Well, there is. There is hope. You can turn this around, and let us know how we can pray for you. If you want a further guidance on this, we'd be happy to address that. If you write your comments underneath the topic today, we'll be glad to address them. God bless you today. It's been great to be with you, and we will look forward to seeing you next time.
If you are blessed by this ministry, please subscribe, like, and share. You can also make donations at chucklewisministries.com. Join us to keep uncovering the tools to build better relationships together. Let's do this again next week.